so much for the introduction. I'm Ali, and my project today is going to be TOS Unraveled. So a little bit about the founder, which is me. I'm a graduating senior. You would think that's pretty obvious, but it's actually been juniors that have done this class, so I just want to make sure you guys know that. So I've been doing computer science at Grady for the last 4 years. Since freshman year, I started with AP Computer Science Trade Schools, and I went to A. And last year, I kind of just went out of it. I only really did it in my club TSA. And I'm also in TSA, FBLA, and DECA. And then I'm going to be going to CU Boulder for computer science as well as biology. So I'm a little bit nerdy, so kind of boring in computer science. So my inspiration is that I've been involved in computer science for 4 years. However, I haven't really used my knowledge for real-world applications. So when Mr. Combs told us to come up with an idea, he said solve a problem, right? And I didn't know what problem I solved. Obviously not like world hunger or something. I only had a year. But what I did is thought about a first world problem, and one of them is terms of service agreements. Most of the time, companies have terms of service agreements, and they're very long, 20, 40 pages. However, people just scroll down and read them. So what I've been planning and have done is create an app that goes into a company's terms of service agreement and makes it shorter and more readable with scores. So, as I said, it searches terms and conditions and it stores them in a database, and then it simplifies those terms and conditions. So here you can see this is part of Facebook's terms and conditions, not all of it. This is just only one tiny part. But really, they put a lot of words in it, legal jargon, and they make it so the real terms and conditions, the real part of the agreement that's important is actually just buried in a lot of text. So what I would do is just get this tiny part, which is really the most important stuff, and it says Facebook can read your messages. And it's pretty obvious that Facebook isn't the greatest company, but yeah, it just shows that they bury their terms and most important stuff in these long documents. So my objectives with this project is to understand how to make an app efficiently, and with that, learn to read code. That means Swift. And also, I want to understand the legal implications of terms and conditions. Well, that was pretty easy because I just now know that most terms and conditions have really strict legal implications, and if you ever try to sue or disagree with these terms and conditions, you're not going to win. You kind of agree to this, and you're trapped in it. And I also want to create a base of my portfolio for future projects, for college and other things. And then I just want to improve my public speaking abilities, which you guys can all judge yourself. And I'll just say I did good. So this is my logo. I made graphic design, but I don't think Mr. Eckner would be that proud of it. It's pretty simple, but it has these papers. It kind of implies reading. I was originally going to do a scroll, but that was hard. And I also put these neutral bluish color. And I saw that online that these neutral colors get calming, and I put a gradient because a lot of apps have that, and I don't want to have one. I also have many lines at the top, and then it goes with an arrow to show my lines. This kind of shows how my app turns a lot of lines of text and makes it short. And then the simplicity of my logo just shows how my app's supposed to be simple. A complicated logo has a lot of stuff to it, it's hard to read, but this is pretty easy to read. That's my expert advisor, Mike. He's here. He's the chief of data science at Iterate.ai, and he's helping me mostly with the code that isn't Swift. So I use JSON for my databases, and he helped me learn what JSON actually is and how to use it. And that's really what his main part of the project is, to help me with that while I learn Swift on myself. And then as I did my support advisors, there's my brother. He's really close to an expert advisor. He helped me so much with the Swift part of this app, and he's also a software engineer at Charter Communications, and he went to CU Boulder, so I'm kind of just following in his footsteps. And then there's Vince, right there, and he's my other support advisor. He's been helping me a lot with my journals and goals. He makes sure I do them on time, mostly. And then he also sees that my journals, goals, and my project is going well. He makes sure I'm on task, while he's also on task. I don't know if that was that helpful, but and then there's my parents over here. My mom is just my financial advisor in that she gave me her Mac to use because I coded with Xcode or Swift, and I didn't have a Mac, so she just gave me hers, and that's how she's my financial advisor. And then there's my dad. who's a VP of Professional Services at Reports Now. But he was really moral support, and he also knows how to code as well, so he kind of looked over it, and it was really helpful just looking at my code and making sure that was right. My timeline was split into 3 parts. My code, research and development, my database and API creation, and then the implementation of that in my app development. So originally, my timeline was like this. This part is actually stayed the same. This is just with state changes. But I started with Python research and practice because I'm familiar with that language, but I wanted to get back into coding in a way that's easier and just not go straight to a new language. And then after that, I spent all the way till February looking at how to code Swift and just looking at YouTube tutorials and creating sample apps off the app. But this part was removed from my timeline. So originally I was going to do an app and a website, and needless to say, I was a little ambitious having an app and a website. So after about the 2nd week, I just removed this because I really didn't think I'd be a prodigy in being able to create an app and website, especially since my inspiration is a website, so I would honestly just be copying it. And the last part, or second part, is researching the various terms and conditions of multiple companies. So what I did is look at Fortune 500 companies, which are the biggest companies in the world. And I looked at common things in their terms of services. Most of them take your data, and they also have really binding contracts and terms and conditions. So I kind of looked at these common things and made sure that every single page of my app would have these common terms and conditions and bullet points in it. And then I made a database, and I actually took one from the website I was inspired by, TOSDR. And I had a database of companies and their short terms. And the last part is actually integrating that database into my code. So I made these JSON files, but I had to implement that into my app so it would actually display my terms and conditions that were shown. And then at the end, obviously have a simple app finish. And then here is my reason. So the first thing I did, what Prakash called was lightboarding. I did drafting. Mine is obviously not as professional, but what I basically did is I went into my notes and I just started drawing what I wanted my app to look like. So I made 2 homepage drafts, top 2, and then I made one down here. So these 2 just have my homepage. It has an arrow, it has company list, and then an arrow, and you click on it. And then you go in, and it just has short terms. Obviously, my app doesn't look like this. That'd be pretty bad, but this was just a rough draft, and it helped me know what I was going to do. So the next thing I researched is how an API works. So what an API does is it connects an application to a server. So if you want to add, update data, or remove data, you need an API to connect that to your app. So when you're interacting with the API, you want the data to all be in a general format. You suggested to have that, because then you can create general code that makes it so the API in app is connected. However, the API that I found from the website TOSDR was not like that. The API had different apps and different search bar, a toolbar item, and it has a button. So with that button, you can sort by your favorites or the length of their terms of services from the longest to shortest. So if you click on these buttons, it would make it so your favorites would either show up, only those, or it displays it by blank. So this is what it would look like. Up here, there's two buttons. So this one would have the sort by length and favorites, and then this one would lead to another page. And these stars right here were actually the favorites. So if you click on those stars, it would be one of your favorite doing services. So you could go back to them. And since there's a lot of companies on this app, you would want to have favorites so you don't have to search it every single time. The next part I did is actually creating those filters. So when I looked at these JSON files, I made filters with them. So I read through the files and saw how many different points are actually in the file. And then I counted those files and saw that there was a different amount in each one. So, for example, Apple has actually a pretty short term of service, but companies like Venmo has one of the longest terms of services. So if you search by terms of service length, Venmo will come up and there'd be about double the information as Apple. But if you wanted to look at your most important companies, then you would have to search. So here's just actually what it looks like, the sort by favorite. So you click on this button, and then it'll sort by favorite, and it'll sort by length. And this is just like if I did 3 favorites, so my favorite apps or websites and companies are Amazon, Cash App, and Facebook. So I favorited them, and these would be the only ones that showed up. So the next thing I did is create my About Us/settings page. So on this page has a picture of me, and then also has 3 buttons. One to my website, one to my GitHub, and then one to my privacy policy. So when you're creating an app, you put in review, you need a privacy policy or Apple will deny it. So I create one, and then I put that in my app through this button. And I also put the GitHub so people can actually see the code of my app, and the website so they can see more information about my app and process it. And this is the About Us page, which is good me. And then there's also my website, GitHub, and privacy policy. I also did this in dark mode. There's also light mode in this app. You just have to configure it to your system to automatically do that. And then this is one of my last parts. So when you actually go into a company's terms of service, I made it so it goes into bullet points and then also have a score of those 3 things. So here I read through each file and did a loop and then put the score and indice of that and then made those bullet points. And then also with the scores, I colored it. So from 0 to 51%, which is basically F, I made it red. And from 51 to 66, which is borderline like F and D, was yellow. And then from 66, about 75, which is C, which honestly is really good for most of these companies. I don't think any company has more than like 3 that are above that. And then anything above 77 would be great. So this is what it kind of looked like. This is Amazon. So as you can see, every single one of their terms of service agreements is red, which means they are not good for you. If you agree to Amazon services, you're going to have something bad happen to you, or something you don't want happening to you. For example, if they take your data, and actually they can track whatever websites you're on when you have it open, and you agree to that. So make sure that you're not looking at anything when you have the Amazon open. And then down here are the sources. There's actually discussions where lawyers and other more educated people than me actually discuss these terms of services and see what's good about them and what it actually means. And in these discussions, these people create the terms of services and see if they're actually good or not, and helps consumers. And what's next? So I've always wanted to add a camera feature to this app, but my brother, one of my advisors, told me that it'd be hard for me because I'm not super good at code. I'm not a full-on Apple developer, so I still have to do that. But also, I want to fully implement the API that I intended to use. Obviously, this API was very difficult to use and interact with, and I wasn't really able to do that as well as I wanted to. I had to manually input a lot of data, and by using an API, the process becomes much easier, and it would have made my app a little better. And I also want to expand to other agreements. For example, if you buy a house, you obviously have agreements that you have to sign to. We have any contracts at a car dealership or anything, I'm going to expand to other agreements and show what actually happens in there. But most of the time, you have to get lawyers or have to spend many hours on looking at these terms of service or any agreement that you're looking at. For this, if you have a scanning feature, like and then this right here is the QR code to my website, to my GitHub. My app I tried reviewing it for Apple, but I accidentally set the age for kids. So it didn't work. So I have to review that and then be able to upload it. And then here, use my video. Any questions?
What was really difficult about the API? What was really troubling about it?
So most of the time, like when I said, when you have a database, obviously most of the stuff in that is written in a general format.
Right.
So when I call this API, the data was not in the same format. So I wouldn't be able to call all the data at once. So I have to go in individually, and it was a very large database. It was like 1,000 companies.
Right.
So I have to look at every single company and then change it so they all have the same general format, which was just a lot of work. Yeah.
After you went through this great project, did you find yourself more or less concerned about how companies treat your data?
Kind of both. I'm kind of less concerned because I can't really do anything about it. But it's kind of scary to see what there is. I want to spread awareness to it, maybe lobby the Dodgers out to try and get laws to change and make it so companies cannot be as malicious. So basically, it was scan, and it would tell me what company it is or what agreement it is, and then also try and find. I have a new database that have like common places, and you'll see, and it'll tell you what it is.
So you said you wanted to implement like contracts for houses and financial stuff. So what's your plan for doing that?
I don't really know, honestly. I would have to create my own database and then also look at like a general housing contract or something, and then see what terms are usually found in one, and then define those terms.
Does your